Hi there. I thought I would take this opportunity to make a little video comparing the Freewrite and the Freewrite Traveler because I have a feeling there's probably a lot of people out there who might be on the fence, maybe interested in one of these, but they're not sure if one or both or either is going to sort of fit their needs and what they're looking for. So here I have two devices that occupy, admittedly, a very niche space. These are both low-powered, so-called distraction-free word processors for the Internet of Things age. They were both crowdfund ventures created by an American company called Astrohaus, and they are kind of companions of one another, I'd say. In some senses, they're very similar. They have a lot of overlapping features and aesthetics, but in other ways, they sort of take almost diametrically opposite approaches to answering the question of, what does the ideal writing device for a creative writer look like? And so the first device here, the Freewrite, the granddaddy, was released in 2016, and currently it can be purchased on Astrohaus's website for $549. I know. This one, the Freewrite Traveler, was released just this past week in 2020, and it's currently $429 on the Astrohaus website. Now, for the record, I bought both of mine for significantly less, several $100s less than their list price, because as I said, I was an early crowdfunding backer of these, and I will return to the matter of price point later. So first, a little background on my interest in all this stuff as a way of helping to illustrate why these things exist and what sort of hole they purport to fill. It was around 2014, I was writing my novel, Bridgetown, and I was struck by how ill-suited to the task of creative writing a traditional computer could be. Modern word processors on a computer, on a laptop, are really full of product bloat and formatting options that tend to get in the way of your actual creative writing process. It tends to lead to a lot of fiddling with the margins and stuff, and not so much drafting. Now, there are minimalist writing programs that you can download for your computer that seek to address those issues and give you more of just kind of a plain text experience, a little bit more like if you were just writing on a typewriter. But using those minimalist writing apps only sort of made it all the more apparent how suboptimal the physical laptop experience was for creative writing as well. It's kind of lifeless. There's usually a shallow keyboard, sort of anemic battery capacities because these devices have to power full color screens and graphics cards and stuff, and so you go to the coffee shop to write and you kind of know in most cases, I'm going to probably want to bring my charger and find a port to plug into just so I don't have to worry about it. And also the screens tend to be glossy, reflect a lot of ambient light. They're kind of fingerprint magnets. So for all these reasons, it was kind of like these devices are not purpose-built just for creative writing. What if there was something that did seek to address that market in and of itself? My parents, for example, are musicians, and so I grew up in a house full of guitars. And as much as guitars are about the sort of mechanical nuts and bolts aspect of making sound, they're also sort of about serving as a creative lightning rod for an artist. The writers of yesteryear had a similar tool at their disposal, right? The sort of romanticized image of the typewriter, someone on an old Smith Corona or an Underwood, and yet the age of the personal computer, kind of starting in the 80s, had really steamrolled over that for writers and replaced that experience with the kind of hollow function of a multi-tool device that was never developed with creative writing in mind. So I began to imagine, what would happen if I hacked together a tool, some kind of a bespoke writing system, maybe using a repurposed e-ink reader and a mechanical USB keyboard that could deliver, this very kind of focused typewritery experience. And as I began to research how I might go about tackling that problem, I discovered there was this whole online kind of community of people who were already thinking along the same lines. And a lot of them used these devices that already existed, as it turned out, that were, mostly low-end portable word processors built like in the 1990s to be, at the time, more affordable alternatives to laptops. Chief among these are like the AlphaSmart line of products. So I got an AlphaSmart for under $20 on eBay, and I found my own creative output really starting to soar right away. In order to explain why that was, it's kind of like there's something about when you're only looking at a couple lines of text at a time, and it's rendered in just real simple monospaced plain letters. You are in the moment. As a writer, you're really focused on that line, that thought, and you just are kind of running with it, and it's much easier to get into a flow state. And everything that the computer word processor experience brings to the table, it is sort of working at cross purposes and pulling you out of that flow state. So, one thing you have to understand about the whole sort of distraction-free writing ethos is that it's really predicated upon the inherent irrationality of the human mind and especially creativity. So the justification for it may not seem strictly rational if you tend to be a very pragmatic consumer. I'm fully aware you might be watching this and thinking, I don't get it. You could just silence notifications on your computer and use a plain text word processor on your $2,000 laptop, and achieve the same thing. Why do you need a separate, arguably inferior device to do any of this? But the thing is, when we use our computers to do work, to process our finances and Photoshop memes and spread disinformation on Facebook, we're sort of associating that device with a whole host of other baggage in our minds. We're priming our brains to want to multitask and to be connected. And part of the appeal of having a separate secondary device that's just for writing is to separate the activity of creating from everything else that we're doing. So for $20, again, an AlphaSmart, no problem, right? Well, that's not really the full story, because, for one thing, the AlphaSmarts are ancient. The keyboards tend to stick, and even when they were new, they were just kind of cheap and chintzy and toy-like. The screens lack backlighting. AlphaSmarts run on these AA batteries that, if I was resting my wrist on it the wrong way, I might actually kind of like pop the battery out of its housing, and then the whole device would shut down. And then when you actually have typed a document and you want to do something with it, you had to connect the AlphaSmart to your computer using one of those old school square USB cables like you see on a printer, and then place your cursor on the computer side in a blank Word document, and then hit send on the AlphaSmart, and the AlphaSmart would act like a keyboard, and it would just vomit out whatever you had typed, like a player piano, just kind of be typing itself out onto your computer, onto the word processor. Very weird, very kludgy interface. I mean, it worked, it got the job done, but I just thought there has to be a better way to go about doing this. So I was immediately very interested when I saw that this little upstart design company, Astrohaus, was crowdfunding a modern version of that sort of thing. And, they'd be using an e-ink screen, just like on a Kindle, which I thought made a lot of sense. It had support for cloud syncing, so it'd be all, could be tied into your Dropbox or Google Docs. And maybe most importantly, they were actually focused on making a modern device that had good, solid hardware, just like, we come to expect from our modern electronics, like our MacBooks or whatever. So I thought it looked neat. It had a lot of personality, and, arguably maybe it was a little too twee, but, that's like sort of part of the appeal, right? Is again, this isn't just a utilitarian laptop. This is supposed to be something that's got to inspire a little joy, that's got to have some good vibes, got to make you want to use it. And so that's how we got the Astrohaus Freewrite, a device which vexes and delights in equal measure, and maybe a little bit more on either end of that spectrum, depending on who you ask. So first, the good. The build quality is superb. I mean, this thing is metal, and I'm pretty sure you could kill someone with it. It's solid, and it's got a real deal, real McCoy Cherry MX mechanical keyboard, which if you know anything about mechanical keyboards, Cherry is they're the brand to beat. Now, one thing I'll note is these aren't the Cherry MX Blues, for instance, which are the real clicky ones that people associate with mechanical keyboards, have like this very tactile feeling when they bottom out, but are very loud. This isn't quite as loud. And the switches, the feeling, it's more like if you're old enough to remember going to like the public library and using one of those like terminals, those like DOS terminals to look up, something in the collection. It's got like a real smooth kind of travel to it. Still very satisfying. They can kind of tire out your fingers a little bit if you're really like smacking them and bottoming out, but you don't have to. You can do kind of a more light touch, and that's that. So overall, a very good keyboard. It's got this handle on it. Again, they're looking at this as something that you're going to be probably not taking with you everywhere, but when you do, it's nice to have. So overall, the aesthetics, the color palette, these big clicky switches for the Wi-Fi control and the folder selection, very satisfying. So overall, as a piece of hardware, it's great. It's just very charming and a lot of fun to use. And my experience with the support team at Astrohaus has always been great too. Actually had an incident a couple years ago where a mirror fell off the wall, shattered, the glass shards totally scratched this thing up, scratched the screen, and I sent it in and they took care of it in a good amount of time. They were very transparent about the whole process. I feel like anytime I've emailed customer support, I've always been talking to the same person, so all that's been great. Now, what hasn't been great about it, and I'm just going to start with the number one complaint that you're going to hear about the Freewrite. There is no cursor navigation. This is a one-way device. Now you can backspace, but you're going to delete whatever you're on in order to get to that point a line or two above where you want to just make a quick change. I know, it's crazy. But this is by design. This is not a hardware limitation, a memory limitation. This is very clearly a philosophical constraint that gets to the heart of what Astrohaus is trying to do with this thing. So they really want you to engage in a flow state. They really want to separate out the idea of drafting from the idea of editing or revising. I'm sure their argument is if you're typing on a typewriter, you don't have a cursor, you don't have the opportunity to go up a line or two and stick something in there. So I get it, but my big issue, my big sticking point with that is that so often you will want, you just as a writer, you will be thinking of something, typing something out, and you'll go, oh, you know what, actually, I need to like start this thought slightly different in order to make it connect and make sense with what I'm about to say. And so you want to just go in and make a real quick tweak. It's not a big edit, it's not a big revision. You just want to complete your thought. And being unable to do that is actually more distracting than having the cursor. So it's counterproductive. They're just, Adam Lieb, the guy who started this whole thing, he seems to be like really all about this no cursor thing, and I don't quite understand why. So that's my biggest complaint about it. What I end up doing is I sort of like space, brackets, note to self, go back in and add the following, and then write whatever I want to stick in there. And then when I go and I edit it, I gotta go and do that. So come on guys, this is a little silly, right? Other small complaints, the price tag, it's $549, it's a lot to swallow. Early versions of the operating system had a lot of reliability issues, at least in my experience, where it would like freeze. I would come back to it after, having been in sleep for a while. The whole device would be frozen, to have to do a hard reset. Sometimes the text would take a while to pop up on the screen, lag a few seconds. Mostly, as they've rolled out operating system updates, those issues seem to have gone by the wayside. I'm pretty happy with the overall reliability of it at this point. I will say I've never gotten the advertised battery life. Now, maybe it's gotten better with the OS upgrades and I just haven't noticed, But I can tell you that even if I left this with the Wi-Fi turned off and sleep for 4 weeks, I'd come back to it and, the battery would be at critically low. So there is a second generation. If you go and buy one now off their website, it'll be the second generation that purports to have 2 times the battery life. But I can't comment on that either way. I just know, normally I leave this thing plugged in at my desk, so it's always topped off, and it's been fine. But that's kind of annoying considering that one of the main selling points of a device like this with an e-ink screen is that the battery life should be way, way, way longer than what you would get with a laptop. So overall, I'd say I've been a satisfied customer, even if it's required at times some patience and understanding on my end. I'd sort of equate it to how Tesla owners love their cars, even though they'll be the first ones to admit that they have the reliability of a Yugo and a lot of quirks. It's a niche thing, and, it's made by a small company, and sometimes you have those interesting experiences. I'd say that with the Freewrite, Astrohaus delivered a very solid first product, but it certainly wasn't the final word on what you could do with this kind of distraction-free modern word processor experience. So that brings us to the new entry in the lineup, the Traveler. Now, even though the Traveler purports to solve the same dilemma as its big brother, it chooses to do so in a very interestingly different way. If the Freewrite is like a device beamed in from some alternate universe where the modern laptop never was invented, the Traveler is just that, a laptop. It even says so on the box. And like a regular laptop, it's got a clamshell design. It's got a low-profile keyboard here, and the confidence-inspiring metal construction, heavyweight construction of the Freewrite has been replaced by a plastic housing that, it's lighter, it's a little flimsier, a little hollow feeling. Definitely plastic. When I took it out of the box, my first thought was this thing is going to be a scratch and a fingerprint magnet. Unlike the Freewrite, which, Astrohaus kind of positions as this heirloom grade thing that's gonna last you as long as you want to take care of it, I get the feeling the Traveler is very much a modern consumer electronic that, let's just say it, inevitably will end up in a landfill. Eventually the keyboard will start to go or something, and that'll just be it, right? And yet, despite these differences, the characteristic, quirky Astrohaus design language remains. It's got the same cheerfully bold retro color scheme, and it has just, I think, an absolutely gorgeous profile when closed. I mean, seriously, this thing, it doesn't look like a laptop you've ever seen. There's something about this sleek package that invites you to want to open it up and just have a quick 30-minute writing session. So inside, we can see it's got the same e-ink screen, the secondary status bar, the ABC file structure, and the Wi-Fi syncing setup, all just like on the big Freewrite. But what's this? Could it be arrow keys? Cursor navigation? On the Freewrite? Why, yes. All snark aside, the Freewrite Traveler finally has cursors. Now, I'm going to hazard a guess that Astrohaus's thinking goes something like this, that the Freewrite is this premium, luxury statement piece about separating the drafting from the revision process. Whereas the Traveler is kind of supposed to be like the true successor to the Alpha Smarts, where it's more of a portable, minimalist laptop writing computer. And so I guess that makes cursors a more acceptable compromise or something. But seriously, guys, the fact that we got the cursors on this one, and that's, as far as I can tell, the only difference in the operating system between the two devices, makes the cursor's absence on the Freewrite all the more noticeable, all the more of a sticking point. Come on, Adam Lieb, it's time to put the dang cursors on the Freewrite. You can even make it an option buried in a sub-menu if you want. I won't mind. On the flip side, the Traveler can't compete with the Freewrite's pure tactile joy. The Cherry MX switches are gone, and which is understandable, as you're probably not going to want to cram a full mechanical keyboard layout into a device like this without significantly adding to the profile and weight and cost. But considering that these are supposed to be dedicated writing devices, I'd almost be okay with the trade-off. Another oddity to me is the screen, because, in most respects, the relationship between the Freewrite and the Traveler is that the Freewrite is kind of for the home, and the Traveler is the thing that you're going to go out and take to the coffee shop with you. But the screen here is hidden away behind this glossy, clear plastic layer, which means that you don't have as much control over glare. It's kind of a bummer because the OG Freewrite, the matte screen performs so much better than a laptop or a tablet in direct light conditions. And that really helps justify going with the e-ink screen on one of these instead of a more modern display. So not having the advantage of that on the Traveler is a little weird to me. On that note, I have to say the Traveler has some very unfortunate timing, because, after having a couple understandable delays in pre-production, because, hey, that's how it goes sometimes. The COVID-19 pandemic hit, and then the Traveler, all the supply chains got disrupted and everything. So now, by the time the Traveler comes out finally, the whole idea of taking a little writing device and going to the coffee shop or whatever to get some work done in that kind of anonymous din of the creative environment just wasn't happening as much, at least not in America. And yes, I'd say, the price on this one too is quite steep for all but the most dedicated distraction-free writers, because the materials aren't as high quality as what you get on the Freewrite. So the premium price, even though the price tag is lower, in relative terms, it doesn't feel like as good of a value. And there is one other small thing I have to point out, and it's gonna seem silly, but the kerning. The kerning on the Traveler logo. It's not, the T and the R, they're way off. They need to be tighter with the other letters. I mean, you can't make this absurdly twee, subway tile and exposed brick, pour over coffee, like white hipster dude in a plaid shirt, coastal elite typing device, and then screw up the typography. Come on, guys. What are you doing? So, more or less, there you have it. Two devices, two sibling devices that reflect the same charming spirit that is utterly unconcerned with whether you think they make a single goddamn lick of sense or not. They are certainly not for everyone. In fact, they're not for almost anyone. But here I am. I own both, and I don't regret either purchase. I love them because I am so damn happy that someone finally is out there making a modern, high-quality writer's instrument. And yes, it's true, they have their limitations, they have their quirks, but by way of comparison, how much great music was made on synthesizers whose limitations and quirks ultimately shaped that art? If you're cutting a record on a Fairlight CMI synthesizer, you're going to produce something characteristic in a way that modern music software like Pro Tools just never will, no matter how good they are at simulating old synths, because of the headspace that it forces the creator into. So, I kind of think of Astrohaus's devices here in a similar way. I know that I tend to spill a lot more e-ink when I'm writing on one of these than I do digital ink when I'm writing on my laptop. Because on my computer, my eyes get tired, my brain gets foggy, the whole process eventually just starts to feel like work. And when I'm writing on a Freewrite, it never feels like work. And that's really all that these types of devices need to be able to deliver on at the end of the day. Astrohaus's devices give me like a little creative sanctuary, a little space to write in that's like having a typewriter, but without having to deal with the ribbons and the ink and the incredible noise or the weight or sticking keys or I guess trying to use an OCR scanner after I've typed something up in order to ingest it into Google Docs so I can do anything with it. No, I mean this is the typewriter of the modern age. Now, strictly speaking, are either of these worth their admittedly eyebrow-raising expense? Ultimately, that's in the eye of the beholder. I don't think Astrohaus is trying to fleece us here. I think these are, relatively small batch devices which are going to have a higher per unit manufacturing cost. And, look, if a guitarist can spend a couple $100 on an entry-level guitar, spending a few hundred on my instrument doesn't seem that outrageous to me. However, I would advise anyone interested in getting a Freewrite to check online first. Check eBay, because I think these are the kinds of purchases like home gym equipment where inevitably you're going to have a large proportion of customers buying it in an aspirational, like, oh, this will get me to write my novel kind of way. And then they go through, NaNoWriMo, November, and they kind of stop using it and it collects dust and it becomes a paperweight. And then these things end up on eBay. So there's a good chance you'll be able to pick one up at a pretty decent price relative to buying a new one. I think for me, these were absolutely worth the early backer prices, but the list prices are a little too rich for my blood. Well, that's mostly it. What am I supposed to say at this point? Do you have any questions that I didn't answer in this video, or experiences of your own that you'd like to share? Feel free to leave a comment below and like and subscribe. And although this isn't really a product review channel, I just sort of felt like this was a video that would be interesting to make and could have real benefit to people. So, but I promise I only upload good stuff. Okay, bye!